There we go.
Yeah, you're back. Yay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I'm just talking about national trends. So look, we need to realize that the United States is moving from a nation of homeowners to a nation of renters.
Okay.
That's one. Okay. Two, there's a growing gap between rising rents, particularly in metropolitan areas, and stagnant wages. So one of the statistics that we know for the Bay Area that I think applies to LA as well, that a two-earner household, where both earners are making minimum wage and have full-time jobs, right, can afford rents in only 5% of the Bay Area's neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are on the far edges of urban life. The commutes from those parts of the Bay Area into Oakland, Alameda, etc., is about 3 hours each way.
Wow.
Right? So we know that in LA, people are getting pushed out, and where are they going? They're going to Lancaster and Palmdale. They're going to the Inland Empire, right? So that's a part of these huge geographies of displacement and commuting. The third thing that we have to think about is the ways in which, as people get evicted, in this context of rising debt, rising precarity, stagnant wages, they are not getting displaced to somewhere else. They're ending up on the street. They're a paycheck away from houselessness, right? So these are trends we have to think about, and we've got to think about basic rent stabilization and tenant protections, but stop this kind of pathway into houselessness.
And can you share with the audience that is watching, or people that are going to watch later on tonight, or when they have a moment to watch this live stream, what are some of the issues? Because I think often people think that city councils have all the power, and we do have a lot of power to protect renters, to promote more affordable housing. Like, what happened to land trust? Why aren't we talking about land trust anymore? It's something that I agree with you that for a lot of us, like, for example, I went to the Kennedy School. I'm an educated Latina immigrant that has a good job, and yet I cannot afford a home. I cannot afford a home. I cannot seem to save money for a retirement or for the down payment for a home. It's extremely hard. So talk to us about what are some of the things that are happening at the state level that don't allow us, and when I become a city councilwoman, to enact more rent control or more rent protections or protections for renters. And then after this, I think we can move on with house property again, because that's a really good also segue that I would like to mention more about, like I would like to talk more about.
So some of you will remember Proposition 10, which made it to the ballot but got defeated. What Proposition 10 would have done is to loosen some of these state-level restrictions on rent control. So there have been important victories in Los Angeles around rent control, say rent control in unincorporated East Los Angeles, a rent freeze in Culver City. I think that precisely because we've moved to being a nation of renters, because educated Latinas like yourself are realizing that they are locked out of home ownership. We are beginning to see very powerful tenant unions, and we need many more of these. So the LA Tenants Union, the long-standing Union de Vecinos. I think that we have to think about renter power, and we're beginning to think about renter power and how renter power demands rent stabilization and so forth. But there are also restrictions at the state level. So acts like Costa-Hawkins that limits rent control. So one of the challenges, one of the national trends that I think our political leaders most have to confront in the coming years is that the very Wall Street actors that perpetrated the subprime crisis are now back, and they've been on a buying spree. And in California and other states, they have been buying up foreclosed homes and turning them into rental property. The most notorious of these is Blackstone, right?
Blackstone.
So when we talk about landlords, we're not talking just about mom and pop landlords making rent by renting the apartment next door and living off that rent. There's some of that. We're talking about massive corporate and Wall Street landlords that own thousands of properties, and many of these properties are not protected in California at all by any rent stabilization or tenant protections, right? And Blackstone and others have been doing this as a systematic business strategy where they are accumulating all of this rental housing and have become, Blackstone today owns more rental housing than any other entity in the United States. Mm-hmm. This is monopolistic power. It's corporate power. It's corporate landlordism. And I think at the level of the state and city, we've got to think about what this means for tenants and what regulations are needed to manage these markets.
Absolutely. That's an interesting approach to see how it's not just some people that bought a home and now are renting it because they don't live in LA anymore, but that is a bigger systemic issue that we're facing, and that is very, very intentional from some places. Mm-hmm. And it disregards a lot of the needs of a community that have been there for a really long time. So I want to read something just to segue. I want to read something that somebody sent me prior to this, prior to this live stream. Let me find the message. And it was someone that this is what it said. And the heart of the comment said, I bought in Jefferson Park, which is an area that is part of my district, not because I'm against gentrification. I believe in progress, and it's exactly what I support. And if you look around my neighborhood, it isn't the people who have lived there for 30 years who are taking care of the properties and fixing up their homes. It is those of us who are buying into the neighborhood and increase the value of the neighborhood. So what do you think about that comment?
So I think that it is that it signifies that there are different ways of thinking about what the value of a neighborhood is. Mm-hmm. So one can argue that the value of a neighborhood is reflected only in rising property prices. Mm-hmm. Or one can think about the value of a neighborhood lying in a community that has been there, that knows each other, that has cultural roots in the neighborhood. And I think that both understandings of value are at work here. So this particular person who sent in this comment is like, we've been improving our homes and investing in them and fixing them. But that for me is often an improvement of price, but not necessarily of the cultural life of a place. So I think that in this case, we also have to ask whether or not these improvements in property values come on the backs of those who are being pushed out of this neighborhood. And I would call into question this argument that people who've been living there for a long time have not been investing in the neighborhood or in those properties. Mm-hmm. I would argue that we don't know that. That's a perception. It can be a very problematic perception about certain neighborhoods. But all through US history, in cities, certain neighborhoods have come to be stereotyped and stigmatized as slums, as ghettos, right? These are often quite racialized connotations. Mm-hmm. And that has served as the pretext for displacing people. So I think what the movements in places like Boyle Heights, for example, teach us in Los Angeles is that the value of a neighborhood lies not just in the hipster coffee shops and the art galleries that move in, and in rising property values. It can be very much about the life that communities have built. And that is not often reflected in monetary terms, but there are many other forms of improvement, right? So I think this question of improvement, it goes back to what we started with. This coupling of improvement with displacement, there's a coupling here of improvement also devaluing what already exists.
Mm-hmm.
I had to ask these people, why move into neighborhoods where you think your neighbors don't take care of their properties and you're not that interested in them? Why? Because surely one's life is more than the value of one's home. Yes, those of us who are homeowners do care about the value of our homes, but there is more to a neighborhood and community than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I agree with the perception that one has. I think I wanted to add that there are folks that were born in certain neighborhoods and places like West Adams, for example, where it was the first one of the first places where African Americans were allowed to buy property. I can give you plenty of examples of folks that I know in that community that live there and that have inherited homes. And life right now is, of course, very different than life 50 years ago. And a lot of these folks that have inherited homes perhaps don't have the income or the capacity to maybe fix their homes. Yeah. A lot of ways, these homes are older, and it costs more to fix them than to actually get a new home. Yeah. Believe it or not. And people feel extremely passionate and invested on these homes. So I have the most appreciation and understanding on both, on the people that just got there and want to see their neighborhood beautiful and want to see cafes and want to see good grocery stores that sell fresh food, that want to see parks, that want I feel like working together we can accomplish so much more than blaming people. Well, we want to gentrify our neighborhood. I feel that people don't quite understand what that means. And I think that it has become for certain communities or for certain people that gentrification is a good thing. Just like
that seems to be
something to gentrify this area.
Yeah, I know that is really puzzling to me how that came to be. But look, you know more about this in terms of the campaign you're running and your sort of political priorities. I think we've got to think about political representation and voice. Mm-hmm. Who are the loudest voices? Which voices are being heard in neighborhood councils? Which voices are being heard at city council? Right? And who has the time to make their voices heard? Mm-hmm. And I think this is a real issue because there is then only one particular understanding of neighborhood improvement that is being advanced. And we're seeing the same thing with regard to our unhoused neighbors. It's really loud homeowners with a very particular understanding of spatial order and safety and security are the loudest voices.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to ask you, and coming back to how are we going to supply more housing for folks that, there's a huge trend right now on single family homes versus 4-story, 5-story, whatever, we see this in other cities that have welcomed more of these practices than in LA. In LA, there's a great resistance. What do you recommend? Yeah. What would you like to see on at the city council level in terms of a housing development? That we need it. I mean, we need it. And like I said, I keep talking about responsible. So can we build housing in places 4-story, 5-story? Like, what is appropriate? What and how can we make sure that this housing is actually affordable to the people that live in the area?
So I think that the things that aside from stopping the criminalization of poverty, which I'm sure we'll come back to, mm-hmm. and aside from rent control and tenant protections and right to counsel, I think if we're talking about building more housing, I think it's really important for us to think about models of housing that have a social component. Now, in the United States, public housing has come to be stigmatized.
Yeah.
But we really need to think about other models of social housing. And you earlier talked about land trusts.
Yeah.
The community land trusts, which have been around for like 20, 30 years in the United States, is a really important model actually of home ownership, where the land is owned usually by a non-profit private entity, by a trust, that has responsibility for the permanent stewardship of that land, right? So the land is taken off the market and it stabilizes housing prices. And people are able to often own homes in these community land trust developments, whether they are apart condos or something else. But when they sell their home, there is a cap, right, on how much the price can increase. So it is about a semi-social model of housing. And I think that there are many of these kinds of models. In Europe, not only is there an ongoing discussion of what it means to build more social housing, but there's also a discussion about these models of cooperative housing, where in fact you can have dense housing that is affordable to working class communities, and where there is some, what we would call decommodification at work, where there is a social component, right? And look, this is a basic idea. The property, we can have private property rights, but property, the ownership of land, is a social function. There's a social aspect to it. It's about shelter. It's about inhabitation in a city. And often these things are regulated by governments for the good of everyone. And so we've got to think about other models of housing, which is not just about building more, but it is about what are we building and what are the models of financing involved in that kind of building.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. How do we rethink about housing and how do we view housing? One thing that I want to mention that is important to talk about as we talk about housing, and sometimes we don't see it as related, but as someone that is running for office often sees this in elected officials, is the money in politics and how developers have great influence in political campaigns. If you look at some of my opponents' contributions, the majority of their contributions come from developers and from developments. If you go around reading the news, you see that a lot of developers have come to low-income communities that are beautiful but are now upgraded and are kind of in this transition, and bought blocks and blocks of properties to later redevelop. And that's a reality that we cannot shine away from. Even if I was to become the president of the world, I couldn't turn my head away to this practice. This is happening. This is capitalism at its best. So how people in Los Angeles, how community, and I see this often, where the community takes a stand of like, you're the devil and you're against us. And what is the best practice here to work with these developers that, for better or for worse, own a lot of property now in our neighborhoods? I know about this in West Adams, in Jefferson Park area, and Mid City is also happening. How do we work with these developers? What are some of the policies that we can create so that we can bring more responsible development? I know that LA has a 20% threshold if you build something, and if you include affordable housing, so-called affordable housing, quote unquote affordable housing, that you can have some sort of incentives to do that. But I mean, if you're building a 7-story, if you're building an apartment with 70, if you're building something and it has 70 apartments, we're talking about 10 apartments that are going to be affordable, and a big use. So what are some of the things that we can do to, are we working with these developers? Do we continue fighting the developers? Like, what do we do? And I think it is a bigger question, and it's in an institutionalized real problem, and it's a systemic problem. So what are some of the things that we can do to fix the system then?
And it is a systemic problem. It goes all the way to the top of the food chain as we think about big money in politics, as you noted, as we think about unregulated corporate power. These are all issues that are playing out in sort of the debate at the national level, right? Particularly among the Democratic presidential candidates.
Mm-hmm.
But at the city level, we've got to think about ways in which, precisely as you noted, developers have been unregulated and they are able to therefore purchase property and sit on that property, speculate. They are able to flip those properties because their business model is around flipping. So we have to think about what that regulation looks like. So one of the cities I've been thinking a lot about is Berlin. In the housing justice world, Berlin is what is on everyone's mind. Berlin is a city where 85% of the residents are renters.
Mm-hmm.
And thousands of people in Berlin, 85% are renters. Thousands took to the streets earlier this year, and they pushed for a rent freeze. There's very good rent control in Berlin, but they still said that their lives, that they were being pushed out of apartments, rents were unusually high. And they said part of the problem was that a handful of real estate companies controlled rental property in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
So there's now a referendum, a citizens' referendum that's going forward in Berlin, and we'll see if it passes next year or not, but they got more than enough signatures for it to go forward, thousands of signatures. And what it's going to do is that it's going to place a cap on the number of units that can be owned by a single real estate company. It's going to be a cap of 3,000 units. So any real estate company that owns more than 3,000 rental units in the city of Berlin, and Berlin's a small city, will have those excess units expropriated by the Berlin city government and will be turned into social housing or cooperative housing.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that, yes, of course, you can have real estate companies and you can have developers, but they can't control huge amounts of property such that no one else has any power in these housing markets, right? This is about the concentration of power. This is about monopolies. And monopolies have to be regulated.
Uh-huh.
And our political leaders have to do that. But as you noted, they are often taking money from those same developers.
I'm losing you again.
I can see you actually.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, your sound was off just for a moment. I mean, that's an interesting idea to run on how to avoid the monopoly of certain real estate and developers to develop certain areas or such. I think we have a bigger problem at hand, and I do think that, again, we need to kind of figure it out how we're gonna all work together in a way that is gonna bring more responsible housing. We got about 10 minutes to go, and I have some other questions that people are asking. One of the things that I want to pick your brain about is OTC, which is the oriented TOC, transit oriented community.
Development, yes.
Yeah. And last week I went to a meeting about the extension of the metro, in different areas, and is one of the plans is to come by where I live in Mid City, and they were, and I was pleased to see a pamphlet that talked about what OTC and gentrification was. TOC. I keep saying
TOC. Yes, TOC.
Communities. And there was a lot of comments about how is this gonna affect my livelihood? Is this gonna turn crazy? What's gonna happen? So, what are your thoughts around transit-oriented communities?
Yeah.
The idea that now we got to build right next to subways or metro stations or such, and that is going to be better when in a lot of ways have gone worse and has really gentrified the community.
So, about 10 years ago, there was so much hope about transit-oriented communities.
Mm-hmm.
and transit-oriented development, right? As sustainable future with affordable housing, dense affordable housing for our cities.
Mm-hmm.
The research being done at UCLA and UC Berkeley, and there's a wonderful book produced by some of my colleagues here at Berkeley, and I urge the listeners today to look at something called the Urban Displacement Project,
Uh-huh.
which runs out of UC Berkeley. They've just published a definitive book called Transit-Oriented Displacement.
Mm.
So it's based on research done in many cities in the US, and the research is conclusive.
Mm-hmm.
That transit-oriented development has turned into transit-oriented displacement. There are some communities that I think have been able to negotiate the details of transit-oriented development to stop displacement. So Fruitvale in Oakland is a good example of that, with powerful community organizations that were able to stop displacement and insist on certain protections. But for the most part, I think communities are correct in being fearful about transportation infrastructure. So transportation planners have to do a lot more to protect communities near these transportation developments.
I think I'm losing you again. I don't know if we have good signal on your end.
I can
think
see
the
you,
internet might
but
be
yeah,
with you a little bit.
yeah.
So, Otis, I oftentimes that this was done with the best intentions.
Mhm.
It makes total sense. And as someone that has, that wants to see people use more public transit because it's better for the environment, it's better for them. You can read a book, you can have community, you can, to see that this has actually been completely taken the wrong way is quite sad for me to watch.
Yes, and again, seemingly simple things like rent stabilization would help. Because
Mm-hmm.
really what happens is people move into these developments, right? Young professionals who want to ride transit, who want to be green and sustainable, and rents go up. New developments have higher rents that are unaffordable for existing residents. And so we have to think about what those mandatory set-asides are, what those protections are. This is not about we don't build more public transit. That's not it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to think about how those policies are accompanied. How those transportation policies are accompanied by housing security policies.
And can we have an ordinance in Los Angeles for rent stabilization with the current state level policies?
Well, the current state level, so, Proposition 10, by the way, Proposition 10 was defeated because Blackstone, which I mentioned earlier, spent something like $120 million to defeat Prop 10. Talk about big money, right? And you can imagine what Blackstone thought was at stake in rent control and why it's fighting rent control so much.
Mm-hmm.
But AB 1482, which is limited in all sorts of ways, is nevertheless one small step towards statewide protections. But there are certain limitations to AB 1482, of course. I think that we are moving towards rent stabilization, and I think it's important to look to the state of New York, where earlier this year there was quite important statewide rent control and tenant protection legislation passed. And I think the New York victories give us a good indication of why this is needed in expensive housing markets like LA and New York.
Absolutely. I've been watching New York and I have some really good friends that are in the forefront of that fight. And I have been making incredible strides on affordability and housing in New York City. So it's exciting to watch that as a big city also can enact those type of policies and succeed. So we are just on the top of the hour, and I want to just ask you the last question that I have here, which is let's see. So besides rent increases and possible displacement. What about homelessness issues and not enough housing that has been happening for years? The high housing market and affordability. What are some of the solutions to those all issues that have been happening for years in our city?
So a lot of the work I currently do concerns the unhoused, and I use the term unhoused rather than homeless or houselessness because I think people have been systematically unhoused in Los Angeles.
Professor Roy, 1 second, can you forward that again because
Sorry.
I lost it for a second.
So I said, a lot of the work I currently do is around what I call the unhoused. I'm using the term unhoused rather than homeless or houseless because I think people have been systematically unhoused through policies in LA. And I think what has happened in LA is soon going to become one of the meanest cities in the country. What we've seen in LA is an unfortunate collection of municipal ordinances passed by our city council that criminalize the unhoused.
Yes.
That violate their civil rights and constitutional rights and make it impossible, therefore, through criminalization, for people to get out of houselessness. This has to stop. And so many of the partners we work with, the LA Community Action Network, the Legal Aid Foundation of LA, Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, are committed to stopping evictions and the pathway into houselessness. But we also want to stop the criminalization of poverty and systematic unhousing of people. Prof. HHH showed that LA voters have an interest in housing their unhoused neighbors, but that money has to be spent quickly. It has to be spent wisely.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to have the Prof. HHH funds. If also in parallel to that, as a city, we are spending millions of dollars on homeless sweeps and policing unhoused. That money, those are public resources. That money should be spent on housing and services, not on citations and arrests.
Yeah, I agree. And providing services to our unsheltered community, like bringing showers, portable showers that they can shower, bringing portable bathrooms that they can use once or a day, is an incredible hygiene issue. Also, to have people sleeping on the streets where there is no restrooms and facilities where they can use. I mean, folks, this is the reality. And as much as we don't want to see it, it's there. And pretending that it's not happening and complaining about it is not going to help. What's going to help is providing more services for them to get them off the streets. And criminalizing them, as you said, is not the solution in my book either. And asking folks that are sleeping now in their cars to not do that and criminalize them and making it against the law is also not okay. Instead of having ordinances and policies where we open places so that people like that can park and have a safe space where they can stay. I think that's extremely important for me. So we are on the top of the hour, and I am so grateful for you for doing this work with our community, number one, and for taking the time on your busy schedule to speak with me. Thank you so much. And I know that we can find you on Twitter, and I'm sure on the live stream there's going to be a lot of questions for folks. So you can find us there. You can also watch this live stream again. And thank you so much for being with us. And for those of you that are have been watching for an hour, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for learning. Part of having a virtual town hall meeting is to provide information to your fingertips so that you can learn more about pressing issues in our community and about also who your representative is and your future candidate, which is something that I'm more than honored to be working towards to represent you right now in our city. If you want more information about who I am and what my platform is around housing and affordability in our unsheltered community, you can go, wait, hold on, let me show you. right here. Right here is my my website, aura2020.com. You can always send comments via email or also on social media. And thank you so much. I hope that you are leaving today with a strong message that we need to figure out better ways to have responsible housing, ordinances that are going to support our community, that we are under attack. And if you're a person of color, a middle class, working class, the system is not working for us, but we together can really change that. And I'm here to do exactly that with you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will speak to you very soon. Good night.